Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who, like a science fiction hound that really has to pee, notice every single curb and every single fire hydrant on their walk through literature. Each week we spin the wheel and land on a new genre. So spies, mysteries, horror, romance, SF. It's all on our shelves, and right now we are reading through every single short story in Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions anthology. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in how Harlan Ellison says that this is his favorite story in all of Dangerous Visions, or at least one of his favorites, and I want to kind of pick apart what that means.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in, I guess, community, because Ellison is very interested in this story about community and sci-fi authors. So is Lafferty in Community. So much to the point where he has the whole science fiction idea in this story is based on community.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting that Ellison prefaced the story with was talking about how much Lafferty knows about other languages. He says that Lafferty has studied basically every European language. He really hones in on how, I guess you could say, like linguistically wide-read Lafferty is. And it's interesting to see how much of that knowledge is kind of like placed within the text. But I guess before we say anything more, we should probably ask what happens in this story, Bob.
Oh God, you're going to make me do it? Okay.
Sorry.
This is an interesting story. We got two cowboys who are in the middle. They're going towards something that kind of reminds me of Annihilation, what it would be like Area X. You know, it's this weird place. They know things are going to get a little strange. Or maybe like the Bermuda Triangle. They keep saying there's this mirage. We're coming to this mirage. People have talked about it before. Weird things happen in the mirage. And the closer we get, the weirder it's going to get. As these two cowboys, they're quite different, and they're reacting to this whole idea differently. So one seems to be kind of doubting that this strange mirage Bermuda Triangle place exists. The other one says, no, we're going to go. We got to get there no matter what. And they finally get to this mirage, and they can start feeling strange things happening to them, or strange things happening in their surroundings, or reality kind of seems to be coming apart at the seams. And then also trying to represent itself in front of their eyes. One gets scared and runs away. The other decides, no, I'm going to keep going. Then we cut and we never see those cowboys again. And then we just go from scene to scene to scene of people leaving and going towards something else. It reminds me of Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where everyone has that vision of the mountain, and they're making the mashed potato mountain, you know? And so they know they have to go to Devil's Tower. Here, it's all of the, I guess, all of the gypsies of the world suddenly realize I have to go back to go back to this place, go back to this mirage, because that is where home is. It's quite an out there story, but it was... Anyway, I guess, is that everything that happens, Zach?
Almost everything. There's a flip side to this. So then after you get this like super fast cut of, you know, all of these people in all of their different lives all being like, we have to go back. We skip ahead, I guess, to the future, and what we get is people talking about the event. And they say that basically what has happened is that aliens have scooped up a sliver of the earth, which was the like Romani homeland, the gypsy homeland, and now they've brought it back. So it's like the missing homeland of the Romani people, but they didn't just put it back. They also took another scoop out of the earth. So that scoop they took out was Los Angeles. And then it's like cut to the future, and we're now like reading a sociological document about the Angelinos. I don't know how to pronounce that word. Angelinos. So basically, it's like whatever position, whatever global position, like the Romani people, the gypsies are in this day and age. Imagine LA people being in the same position. So like, I'll read some of their like sociological commentary. It's like, they drive for hours and days in old and seldom used clover leaves and freeways. It's been said that the majority of the Angelinos are narcotics users. What they inhale is black smoke of carbon and petroleum waste laced with monoxide. Its purpose is not clear. So it's kind of like describing cool 1960s LA people as if LA no longer existed, and they've now kind of fanned out across the globe as a kind of like unified people, but unified culturally, not geographically.
What do you think? Is this idea about the spread of culture, or is it more about could there be? Could it be, Zach? There are lost civilizations on Earth that we never knew about. Is it a lost civilization story?
It seems to be doing both a little bit. And possibly it might be a case of wanting to have your cake and eat it too. I think that this story is primarily focused on questions of diaspora and what it means to have this diaspora embedded in all of these other cultures and all of these different lifestyles and all of these different languages. But I think the thing is that, so that aspect I identified seems to be what the author wants to talk about. That seems to be what he's interested in most. I don't particularly get the sense that he cares about the fact that aliens are scooping up part of the Earth to run experiments on it. It just seems like maybe more of a excuse to have this kind of scenario that he's putting forward. There's a lot to be said if aliens are scooping up, entire cities or entire peoples, or like the homelands of entire peoples. That would be a really interesting thing to investigate, the kind of like philosophic, cultural, whatever ramifications of just the scooping alone, But I think he's more interested in the culture. I think.
I like, just an aside, I like how he said it's an excuse to look at it, because he also says in his afterword, I didn't really want to write this story, except for I wanted to include a character called Margaret the barmaid, because I met someone named Margaret who said, "Can you please put my name in a story?" And he said, "Yep." So that's the whole point of this story, apparently.
Yeah.
But I think it is about culture, and I think that's like the finger on the button, the finger on the pulse. That's what Harlan and Lafferty want to look at, because Lafferty at the very end, he says, "I am pleased to be a member of this august, though sometimes raffish company playing here in this production." He's saying, I'm really excited to be here in Dangerous Visions. And earlier too, in the introduction, when Harlan's talking, he says he's talking about all of the famous sci-fi authors. And he says, Knight, Sheckley, Sturgeon, Bradbury, Clark, Vonnegut. And he says, we know about all of them, and we think they are the pillars that sci-fi stands on. However, he's saying that, quote, the community would not run 1,000th as well as it does without the quiet writers. So Lafferty, he's saying, is one of the quiet writers, one of these science fiction writers who go in there every day, they write good stories. They're not hack writers, as he says, but they're just not famous. They don't get the attention that maybe they deserve. But I think that's kind of an interesting thing, how they're both thinking about this around this story. I think it is a lot about cultures and people sticking together, because there's all of these images of the gypsies in every part of the world suddenly waking up and realizing, okay, I got to go there. I think it's the same kind of, or maybe it's a stand-in almost for these science fiction writers who are coming together and creating this community. And Lafferty, he's in the community trying to keep it going.
I like reading it almost allegorically as the science fiction writing community as these kind of like Romani people displaced throughout the world, kind of like trying to fit into the society, but there's like obviously this stereotype of like not ever really fitting into the society. That's really interesting. Yeah. I do wonder how to evaluate his statement, though, about like the science fiction community running on these kind of like anonymous, quiet writers, because I wonder what qualifies someone to be in one camp or the other. I will say I've heard of or read all of, between heard of and read every person in one camp, but it's hard to judge these people who he says you don't ever remember the name of. I will say that for this story, it is easily one of the more interesting science fiction concepts that I think we've encountered, possibly in this whole book, possibly in most science fiction stories we've read. You can always kind of lump science fiction or SF into various kind of genera. What are they talking about? Are they talking about, is it a spaceship story? Is it a first contact story? Is it a weird zone story? You know, there's all these different kind of like archetypes of science fiction stories that people explore. A time travel story, for example. But I don't think I've ever seen a story quite like this. It's truly a story of its own. And I've never heard of this author before, and I don't know if I'll ever read him again.
I'd like to read more of him again. I'd like to propose a name, I guess. Maybe this already exists, but I think it's kind of a homecoming story. And I think that is a thing in science fiction too. And that's why I mentioned the lost societies earlier. But there are these ideas that, you know, humanity might have been much earlier than we even knew. Maybe there are lost civilizations that are far beneath the sands that we just haven't gotten to yet. There is that kind of idea. And we've seen that with Robert E. Howard. You know, he has that succession of Hyboria, of people devolving and evolving, and they forget. They lose their history because they devolve so much. So we don't really, in that scenario, or in Hyboria, we don't know how long humanity has been around. This is different, where it is like aliens getting involved, you know, maybe planting humanity somewhere, or getting so involved they take it away and they come to study it, changing all of our cultures and moving everyone around. But this homecoming idea of finding the true origins of humanity, or how some outside beings have influenced humanity, is quite interesting. Yes, as a science fiction idea, and then reading into it too far. But Lafferty talks a lot about changing patterns in his life. He's coming to science fiction because he says he's had a lifelong problem with drinking. He says, I was a heavy drinker for a few years, and I gave it up just about 6 years ago, and it left a gap. When you give up the company of the more interesting drinkers, you give up something of the colorful and fantastic. So I substituted writing science fiction. I found that extremely interesting. I know you can't really take a writer's life and put it with a story, but sometimes you read something and you look at their reflection on what they're writing and think, okay, why did they come up with that reflection? How has it hit them? You know, how has the story influenced them, or what does it mean to them? It's interesting to have a habit that seemed to be killing him, you know, drinking heavily too often, and then deciding, I need to stop this, and I need to find something else because that gap might kill me just as bad. And then he found science fiction. I thought that was very interesting about Lafferty, why he's writing that in his introduction.
Well, you can also, you know, if you really want to create like a psychological portrait, you could take the other thing we know about him, which is that he's obsessively reading and learning all of these languages. He's familiar with all, you know, with numerous, he's fluent in a number of languages, but familiar with, you know, a dozen others. And it really paints a picture. I guess I'll say learning a language has the reputation of being a very social activity. You know what I mean? Like, oh, you know, like you see like videos of like, oh, this white guy went into a Chinese restaurant and spoke their native dialect. Amazing, Xiaoma. You know? Yeah. Like it has like a kind of like a patina of being like, oh, so social, you can connect with anyone. But I think the actual like truth of language learning, which I have to imagine that this author knows all too well, is that it's a lot of time alone, running through flashcards, reading, correcting mistakes, you know, like it's not all sociability. So he loses drinking, he spends a lot of time doing this language stuff. And then for his kicks now, for the feeling of spontaneity and creativity that he's longing for, that he once got through alcohol and through social drinking, he's now writing science fiction stories. I think it's the most in-depth psychological background I think we've ever gotten about an author in Dangerous Visions.
Yeah, and it's just a few paragraphs, and then, I wanted to write this because it's about Margaret. I think Lafferty sounds like a great guy. I would love to have, you know, if you could visit.
You almost
people.
said have a drink, didn't you?
I almost, yeah, I guess that's where my brain was going. Oh no, Lafferty and I can have bitters and soda water.
Yeah, wow. Scotch and soda. Hold the scotch. Something that struck me while I was reading this is, in a weird way, it played out in my mind kind of like a movie, as if like something about his writing style, the way he kind of cuts between stuff is very cinematic. And it made me think like, wow, this would make a great movie. But then if you actually like tried to adapt this, I don't know if you could. There's no real characters. It's all just kind of like B-roll shots of people going places, I don't know.
It'd definitely be too many B-roll shots. I don't think it could be done. Yes. Reading this has really gotten me still, we're almost done with Dangerous Visions, and I'm going to be kind of sad to end it. I think it's been very fun to see this kind of experience of bonding between these authors, Harlan Ellison trying to get these people together, trying to get them all into one book. And I can imagine after you were published in this book, you will remember it forever. And it's kind of almost like going through a school program and maybe you come to a reunion. I wonder, is there that kind of feeling when you go through, we're all going to write our most dangerous stories, get them out there, then you do it, and it's almost like your own yearbook. You can go and look at your own, your past.
Wow.
And this thing
I like that yearbook
together.
comparison. Sorry to interrupt. I do like that yearbook comparison. I feel like that is the missing metaphor that we've been looking for this entire
just like the slice from the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with you. We are almost done, and I feel a little sad. But, there's a lot more anthologies out there. I think we already got our sights on the next one, so we'll carry on. We'll push through this and make it happen. All right. Talk to you later, Bob.
Talk to you later, Zach.